also about preventing sickness.
Right.
I don't want people to walk away from this and think that, oh, Montel's telling people with MS what they should do. No, if I can do it with MS and you don't have anything, holy moly, what would happen to you if you did something, right? It's not trying to say to people, if you're sick, you need to do this. Why wait till you're sick?
First thing I tell people to do is add fat to every meal.
Add fat to every meal.
Don't take it, because everyone was ready. Like, what are you going to take away from me?
Right.
What do I want that you're not going to let me eat? Nothing. Didn't change anything you're eating.
Yeah.
When people fast, their energy actually goes up if you measure it by their blood, their adrenaline, and all the good hormones that control our energy, no matter how they feel. Human growth hormone goes up, they actually put on a little bit of muscle, they start to burn the fat, the whole body goes into all these changes.
A lot of people today would look at ketosis as the end goal. I want to be in ketosis. I want to have a lot of ketones in my bloodstream. But the goal really is metabolic flexibility. The goal is to become really good at burning fat and to become so efficient that you don't need to eat a lot of food.
Welcome, 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 and thank you so much for joining us for The Real Skinny on Fat, the truth about weight loss. I'm Montel Williams.
And I'm Naomi Whittle.
And this is our day 2 of a journey into the fascinating world of health and nutrition. And I'm so lucky that we have Naomi Whittle as our guide. And who is she? She's traveled the globe and met all kinds of people, experts all over the place, trying to find out the most important answers to the questions that are facing our country today. And that is health and wellness. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, a friend of mine, calls her the wellness warrior, which is the perfect name for her because that's exactly what she is. She's a warrior, relentless in her search for answers to the ultimate question. How do we live a happy and healthier life? Thank you so much for this.
Oh, Montel, I'm so excited to be here with you today, and I want to share a little bit more.
So wait a minute, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna flip the script on me? You wanna play host today?
I'd love to.
Okay, so you know what you gotta do. Look at the camera, do your thing.
Okay, everyone, take a watch. Montel, I am so excited to be talking with you and sharing so many of your amazing stories. So in 1980 is when you first started to experience the symptoms of MS?
It's kind of insane because as we look back at it now, I've had to go back and look at previous medical records and look at things written by doctors to kind of pull this all together. Right before I graduated from the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, after my 4 years there, I'm completely ready to be, commissioned as it says inside of my Naval Academy ring, a Marine Corps pilot. I participated in a program at the Academy while I was there where I, got 39 hours of flight time in. I was prepping to go to flight school. And about 12 weeks before graduation, when we get our pre-commissioning immunizations, the class of 1980 from the Naval Academy was the last group of people in the entire military that received immunizations by a gun. Because, some military used to line you up, set the gun, shoot 40 guys as they walk through. Unfortunately, and I won't give out what it was, but I was in the group of people, the first 100 guys that went through the line for a particular immunization shot. We know now in retrospect, that gun was set 7 times higher than it was supposed to be.
Oh, wow.
So the first 100 guys that went through the line got an overdose of a particular immunization, 3 of them together, diseases together, 3 times the amount. Out of the 100 that got the shot, about 40 of us went in the hospital. I was one of those 40. 10 of us stayed in the hospital for a long period of time. I was one of those 10. And though it did not cause my MS, it probably shocked my immune system in a way that it actually initiated what was already genetically in me. And so, unbeknownst to myself, and also the entire power of the entire United States military, I was seen at Walter Reed, Johns Hopkins, Bethesda. I was sent to the Wells Eye Clinic in Philadelphia. They kept trying to figure out what was wrong with me, but no one could diagnose it because in 1980, for an African American male to be diagnosed with a disease that was then only found in Northern European Caucasian women, if you look back at, the doctor's desk reference, back then, MS was not a disease seen in people of color. Now, I can go through my history, and my mother is half Caucasian, and she's of Northern European descent, so let's find where that little gene came running through, and it happened to land right in me. I'm the first person in my family's history to ever have a neurological disease. I was misdiagnosed. The U.S. military didn't get it right, and for the next 20 years, I was misdiagnosed. I had multiple symptoms that if anybody really would have looked back at correctly, they would have identified. The guy has MS. But I'm also walking around at 225. I was a big weightlifter. I fought those symptoms just, I think, because of my personality. I worked out, I exercised, I tried to do everything I can to overcome what I thought were injuries from sports. But they were really signals that this disease was picking up its pace. It wasn't until the year, really 99, 2000, that I was officially diagnosed.
Wow. And once you got diagnosed, where did it go from there? And what are you doing today?
That's like the long one. But
yes.
Here, I'll do it in pieces. When I got diagnosed, it was really kind of insane because I again was diagnosed because after 20 years, I went through a bout. People who have MS and people who understand MS knows that it's characterized by episodes. We call them exacerbations. Mm-hmm. Some people call them bouts. I had a significant exacerbation in 2000, so significant that it sent me to the hospital. I was just punched upside the head. I went almost blind in my left eye. I have extreme neuropathic pain that started in my feet that really never goes away. It's there now. It'll stay there until the day I die, I'm sure, until we figure out some way to really, really, really get rid of it. I had a myriad of other symptoms that started that it sent me to a doctor. And when I went to the doctor in 2000, I got the typical diagnosis. Stand by, get ready to die. Go home, wow. End your life. I mean, it's so pathetic sometimes that we don't understand, and lots of people like doctors don't get it, that patients will sometimes listen so vehemently that they will live down to your expectation rather up to their own. And I almost for 1 second in my life allowed this doctor and another to make me live down to their expectation. They give me this whole list of all these things that are supposed to go wrong with me rather than tell me how I could work at keeping things moving and functioning with this illness. So in 2000, again, I literally went through, for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, some of the most horrific time of my life. I suffered from extreme depression. I say it with no pride, but I say it because there's so many other people who experience the things that I went through and they live in silence and never get an opportunity to say them. So I attempted to take my life. It was so horrific. But then I also realized, how dare, again, I live down to someone else's expectation. I had been living this way my whole life, up to my own, and just because some doctor tells me I'm going to be in a wheelchair, literally they had the nerve to look me in the face and say that. So, I set upon a mission at about 2001 and I knew it from the day one, that I have MS, but MS was never going to have me, period. So what do I have to do to work at stopping what was an onslaught? So I changed my diet. I started exercising. And diet was specific because, again, I have an inflammatory disease that's an autoimmune disease, we think. We'll get that another day. But and if we go by what people believe, I need to reduce inflammation. That is my nemesis. And so I went about about a 4-year period of time, 5-year period of time, searching. You know, I mean, you go up on the internet, and that's one of the biggest problems with the internet. You put in the word diet, about 5 million entries come up.
Correct.
So you could run yourself crazy just reading things and chasing things that aren't true. My constitution is a little different than most. You know, I was a special duty intelligence officer in the military. I did complete 22 years in the military, even carrying this disease on my back. You know, I stayed in shape, kept myself, you know, mentally acute enough to be able to do the research for myself. And I applied the same research techniques to MS that I applied to solving the Russian torpedo problem or Russian submarine problem. Or, you know, again, I was a special duty intelligence officer, so I understand how to go through volumes of data, and I did so. And what I found was, okay, what I should try to do is eat naturally. First off, what God put on this planet, we did not adulterate. It can't hurt you.
Right.
Okay? Anything we decide to mass produce, start getting hurt the second you start eating it. So for about 4 years, I went crazy in the world of vegan, tried to be a vegetarian. I did everything I could do and went to doctors and started realizing I was making myself sick because I really wasn't paying attention to the nutrients I was taking in. I was trying to throw away things that people said I should throw away and not even understand why I should throw them away. After a lot of research, I decided that exercise, diet, my emotional well-being were as important as any other aspect of health, including any Western medication or any other Eastern medication or anything else anybody could provide. Once I got enough knowledge to start figuring out for me what worked, I just started modifying that regimen. You know, I was 40 plus years when this diagnosis locked down, and for 40 plus years of my life, I ate meat. I ate things. My body was attuned to the stuff that I was putting in. For me to drastically just void things, you don't know where the penalty comes.
Right.
So I've now weaned myself into a position where I am now really excited about this opportunity to experiment even more with now research that's now proving things. You know, I'm one of those idiots that was stuck on, you know, I need as much protein as I can to blow myself up as big as I want to be. Well, that was good when I was in my 20s, but I'm 60 years old now. I'm 61 years old. You know, when you start thinking about being healthy and being physically fit, you know, people have used all these things going on around the world, from Tough Mudder to triathlons and all these things. There's a lot of baby boomers like myself who think that that's some sort of a prize or a validation of your health. I'm really not sure that is where we should be mindseted at these days. I think that, you know, I want to be healthy for the sport of life. I want to get up every morning and feel good. I want to go to work every day, have a smile on my face. I want to be able to accomplish what I want to be accomplished intellectually, physically, throughout the entire day. I don't have to beat you up a flight of stairs. I don't have to beat you down a flight of stairs. I don't have to beat you wandering across the street. If I'm feeling good about me and everything I require and want this body to do at this age, I can do, that's the testament of health. Running down a course and jumping over 55 blocks and jumping down on the ground, you're starting to realize that, you know, all we really are doing now as baby boomers are adding to the coffers of doctors who are making big money right now on shoulders, knees, ankles, hips. Baby boomers are feeding this. Why? Because we've gotten crazy. We want to do everything to the extreme. I'm never going to look like that 22-year-old guy again, and I don't want to. It took me a lot of time to earn this 61 years of my body, and I want to make sure that this is the one that now functions perfectly. And so, you know, again, as you start researching, I've modified my workout routines now. I used to do just inordinate amount of heavy lifting and big weights, trying to be as big as I can, take up as much space as I can take up. I don't need to do that to be a man. I do resistance training. I do a considerable amount of varied aerobics, and I attempt to vary the intensity almost as often as I work out, which is every day. So I may be intense on Monday. I don't even pick it. It doesn't work that way. I don't go Monday, Thursday, Sunday, Tuesday. No, stop this stuff. I do chest on this. No, I intuitively listen to my body. I can look at my body. I can understand after I've worked out my whole life, I know that, I have been working my shoulders a little bit, and I can start to feel them getting a little tense. So I work them out, and I'll loosen them up, and then I'll work my chest, and then I may work my abs, and then I will do aerobics, and then I'll work a little bit more and a little bit more aerobics. I'm done. For me to put 600 pounds on my back the way I did when I was 32, 33, and 34 years old will never happen again. And I don't want it to, because the pain in my lower back and my hips and that I'm dealing with now is because of that stupidity. And I walk in the gyms now and I see guys my age over in this corner, and if I come back a year later, he's going to be out to here, and he will be a tore bicep, and for what? Yeah. And now it's time to modify my diet again. I have intuitively believed in the ketogenic diet without even knowing what it was, because it's really been part of what I've done, but not to the level of what I think I need to take it to. And that's what I'm so excited about when it comes to getting more knowledge, because now, rather than looking at this as some sort of cast in iron regimen, I know that it's a regimen that I have to get a baseline to. It's just like, I got to graduate from high school to go to college. So I need a baseline. And if I can stay within that baseline, I can modify enough to meet my needs, to meet the needs that I have for whatever will make this body do. When we introduce new theories, that's the one thing I found out, because a lot of people don't know that, I not only work as a television talk show host, but I just literally am so excited about the fact that I was able to take and be involved in a process of taking a company public that works in the neurosciences space. We are doing scientific research in deep brain stimulation, and we are looking at brain plasticity, and we're doing this through clinical trials in ways that other people have not. So I've had a really very quick education in disease, especially everything from Parkinson's to Alzheimer's to stroke and MS. And as I've kind of looked over those things, any of those massive illnesses or massive hits on the immune system really require a massive change of thought from everybody involved. And most people don't do that. They go and let a doctor say, well, okay, this happened to you, XYZ. I don't know what we're going to do, but here, you take this and you take this and, lay down and you're going to be okay. No, you're not. If you think about it, how did cavemen, a couple of them fell off a cliff and broke a leg, and they didn't die. They made it through the rest of their life, maybe 30 more years, hobbling, but they still made it. Okay, so they didn't take any medicine, they didn't take any antibiotics, they made it. Now, of course, we got lots of different bacteria here today, lots of things that maybe require a little bit of help, but they don't need you to do those things for the rest of your life. So what happens is a person gets sick, they go on Western medication, and they don't think that there's anything we can do. I'm so excited about the fact that looking at just information around diet alone, we know that even if we can impact a person's life by 5%, that's 5% better than you felt yesterday. I think about that in my life is, when I work out, every time I go to the gym, every time I exercise, every time I work on meditation and the things that I work on so that I walk better, it makes me walk better the next day. I may not walk better all day, but I'm walking better for half that day, enough that I can stop and go, I didn't drag my foot once. That can happen the same way through diet. Because, if we can reduce inflammation, and you don't have to do so taking extra medication, you just do so naturally, you can wake up the next day and go, wait a minute, that did affect me. So, as you're developing out and we develop out this whole new regimen and whole new thought process, I want people to stop for a minute and say, this isn't just about overcoming sickness. This is also about preventing sickness.
Right.
Being proactive. I don't want people to walk away from this and think that, Montel's telling people with MS what they should do. No. If I can do it with MS and you don't have anything, holy moly, what would happen to you if you did something, right? So that's the purpose behind this, is not trying to say to people, if you're sick, you need to do this. Why wait till you're sick? Why not be as proactive as you can, and at least you'll be ahead of the game if something happens to cross your path. You know, again, when I stopped the Montel M show, which was really, it's very funny. I stopped the show now almost 10 years ago. It'll
But
be
it ran for
17 years. And then after it's running for 17
One of the longest running shows
Absolutely.
ever, right?
And I won the Emmy as Best Talk Show Host. We were nominated multiple times for Best Show. The show really now, this will be 8 years off the air. Now, after the show, I got involved in what we call direct response. A lot of products that I was actually selling to people that people could use to help change their lives. The Health Master blender, I think, started the whole craze in this whole country on a high-speed, low-cost blender.
Yes.
That everybody could participate in. And then after I worked with some products, I also have been working in the space of health and wellness, where I've literally taken a company public that's working on a medical device that hopefully by the beginning of next year we'll get full FDA approval on. And this is a device that's going to impact the way we approach brain science. Period.
Tell us about it.
It's a science that wallowed at the University of Wisconsin for about 12 years. It was created by a doctor about 30 years ago. It's a doctor by the name of Dr. Baccarita, who is considered the grandfather or godfather of brain plasticity. He is the guy who actually did scientific research to prove that the brain is plastic enough to find pathways around damage. Now, the second I heard about that, because people understand MS, if you don't know what it is, multiple sclerosis means multiple scars. In Latin, sclerosis is scar. So I have multiple scars throughout my brain, and because I not only have multiple sclerosis, I have lateral sclerosis. I have scars in my spinal cord. Those scars actually block the signal pathway to peripheral of my body. So that's the reason why there are times when, some of my symptoms, I could have left leg weakness. That means that my signals aren't going through to my left leg. This doctor proved that if you do certain things with stimulation and certain things in thought process, you can literally impact those scars in your brain and find pathways around them. Now, for the last 10 years of my life, I've been working every single day at this science. It involves a medical device that is an experimental device that literally is a grid that plants on the 2 cranial nerves in your tongue, sending a signal directly into your brain over a 20-minute period of time. I send about 26 million pulses into my brain.
Wow.
And I do that paired with rehabilitative therapy of walking or concentration and cognitive therapy. And as you marry those together, that repetitive therapy in this device seemed to, and I'm speaking now in the hypothetical because until it's been locked by the FDA and we get FDA approval, what it seems to do is find pathways around damage. So this is another thing that, everything that I talk to people about with health and wellness, I do.
And how did you learn about this?
Again, I found out about this, really as crazy as this will sound, on an airplane. A flight attendant ran up from the back of the plane and handed me a magazine saying a person in the back wants to give you this, and it was the American Airlines magazine that was in the back seat of my, the seat in front of me, and I looked at it and it said, "The Brain That Changes Itself."
The Brain That Changes Itself.
Which is the title of a book by a doctor by the name of Norman Deutsch, who is one of the top neurologists in the world. That book now has been a bestseller worldwide. He has a second book that's called The Brain's Way of Healing. And again, what do? I research everything I can. I have a sick brain. I want to make sure this brain gets healthy. So anything that comes out about the brain, I'm looking at. And there are tools and things in that book that will help people understand that you have more control than you think you do. Most of us don't think it. We don't buy it. We don't believe this whole word brain plasticity. I'm telling you it's true. Look at me. I'm a 61-year-old man who right now should be dead.
For me,
Dead.
it's so amazing to look at you because I've known you for years. And to think that this airplane, this flight, where were you going, what was going on, it changed your life and will change millions and millions of other people's lives.
You just said something very pointed. You and I have known each other now for at least 9 years.
We've known each other for a long time, and I've never seen you healthier and more focused and more clear. It is remarkable.
Here's what. The last time you and I saw each other, I limped to the room.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see a limp in me at all?
No.
That limp is gone.
I
And
was saying that today because I knew we were going to go for a walk, and I thought, I wonder, is that going to work for Montel? Is he going to be limping?
the limp is gone. It's gone because I'm working at it every single day. This is proof that this can work. So that's one area I'm working in, is brain plasticity. I've literally been involved in the last now full year in a movement, and along with public service announcements with the former head of the NFL Players Association, to talk about traumatic brain injury and concussive brain injury. What we as a society don't understand is right now we have 5 million people walking around within our society who have symptoms of a traumatic brain injury or a concussive brain injury that are demonstrable symptoms that they've gone back and forth to a doctor to see. 5 million people.
Wow.
And you go, okay, well, what does that mean, Montel? That means that right now, when I talk about healthcare in this society, the burden this can be in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years,
Oh, yeah.
it could shut down healthcare in America. We don't have enough doctors, therapists to treat that many people, and right now there has been nothing that can treat them other than some drugs and go home and be quiet. So I've been working very, very vehemently, and number one, making people understand that if you have been a symptom of a concussive injury or traumatic brain injury, this is not something that's just going to go away. You need to see a doctor. People don't understand. You whack that head hard enough getting out from underneath the counter on that countertop, you hit it hard enough that you saw stars or it set you back down on your knees, and then tomorrow morning you have a headache that doesn't stop, and tomorrow afternoon your ears ring a little bit, you have a concussive injury. Again, I don't believe just because it's said, it's true. I'll find truth and believe that. But just because somebody says it, not necessarily true. So just because we're talking about this, I hope people do the research and understand that right now science is proving that we can impact our daily lives just through our diet, education, our own internal sense of well-being.
Montel, thank you so much for sitting with me. This information is so powerful. Thank you.
And thank you for actually putting this out, because I think people are just tired of chasing.
Yeah.
And now we have a path.
Montel, your story is just so amazing, and you have impacted millions of people's lives. You do it every single day. The gratitude that I have, and for all of the people that are watching, thank you so much.
I can't thank you enough for giving me an opportunity to at least share that with others. So thank you.
Even today, I was sharing with you some information that could transform your health. And the doctor was sitting there explaining it to you, and all you were thinking about were other people.
I really, really, really see the responsibility that I have in the 90 million people who probably watched my show over the 17 years that I was on the air at least 3 or 4 times. Those people right now listen to what I have to say, and they reflect on it, especially if it has something to do with their health, especially because they look at me and they say, well, if I'm doing as well as I'm doing, maybe they can do the same. So I assume a responsibility that people don't even understand when I put my name behind anything or I even talk about things. So when I say it's an honor to be here with you, thank you. Now, what I love about our next guest is the fact that he's really going to dispel some myths that we need to fuel ourselves using a lot of protein and sugar rather than what's really necessary, right?
That's right. I think Dr. Klum is an incredibly fascinating individual. He has spent his own life looking at nutritional therapies and studying really on the cutting edge what's coming out and what's there, and then putting it into context so that we can all follow it.
Wow, take a look at this.
It's a great pleasure to have you here, Dr. Don Klum. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Naomi. Pleasure to be here. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
I'm fascinated by your background and what you bring to the conversation today. Can you share with the audience a little bit about who you are and how you became the man you are right now?
Yeah, I think I followed in a lot of the natural footsteps that are laid out in my family. I'm one of 7 chiropractors in my family.
Wow.
My dad's a chiropractor, my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, my sister, my wife, and my daughter just put all their applications in to go to school, and probably next year. So
Congrats.
yeah, thank you. So it was very familiar to me. So I grew up in this concept, and I grew up in the concept of natural health and healing, chiropractic, nutrition, and so forth. So it was part of my lifestyle, so to speak. And so when it came time for me to do it, I first got my nutrition degree. I was very interested in nutrition, got into that. Then I went into chiropractic. Then my wife and I, we practiced for 10 years abroad. And we just went out and we worked with government agencies. We worked with some of the implementation for the WHO protocols in third world countries. We
Wow.
worked with the Costa Rican Medical School and Olympic teams and had some great experiences doing that. And along the way, because these topics that we're going to go into, they're not necessarily a chiropractic topic or even a general nutrition topic that's taught in schools, but they became part of my life. They became very, very impactful because along this journey, we're living in Costa Rica, in a beautiful country down there on the beach, in the jungle, going through. We're young. I grew up in this natural living lifestyle and family. We're raising our kids the best we can, organic foods, outdoors every day. And I ran into problems. All my life, I've had up and down weight problems. The reason I look into this so deeply is because I'm a metabolic anomaly.
Okay, wait. A metabolic anomaly.
Yes.
Tell me, what does that mean?
I am my most difficult patient.
Really?
I work on myself. Things don't go in a linear fashion. What works for general people doesn't work for me, and vice versa. So I wanted to figure it out. And at one point, when we were living in Costa Rica, something shook my cage, so to speak. I had a couple of medical doctors on my staff, and one day at a party for Christmas, which is summer down there, we're at the pool. My doctor came over and he said, "Hey, we need to talk on Monday. We need to come in and have an appointment." And so I did. I went in there. I said, "Great, he's going to quit. I'm in trouble," or something like that. But what turned out is he had seen a lesion on my back, on one of my moles, and he diagnosed it with skin cancer. This happened twice, not once, but twice while I was down there in an 8-year period. I developed these lesions that were diagnosed as skin cancer. I never got them biopsied. I never had them removed. I didn't do any traditional medication, chemo, radiation, or anything like that. I just went and doubled down on the lifestyle that I grew up in, doubled down on what I was learning, and I dove into the books, and I wanted to know why. If this could happen to me, someone who lives this and is teaching this and has been brought up like this, I've never had a prescription medication in my life, then it can happen to anybody. And that really drove me, and I want to know why. How is this going? And then within 6 months in both cases, just doing what I now teach to other people, doctors, and the public, and in my programs, both times the lesions subsided. What happened was they got pretty ugly, they went through a process, and they came up to the surface, and they eventually fell off. And what I actually did is just tighten up the reins of what I knew at that time. So I got doubled down on my exercise. I really took some time off. I sold a couple of my offices. We had 7 offices down there. And I took some time off, and I worked on my nutrition, and that's when I really got into fasting. I got into really strict fasting. I went through all different kinds of fasting protocols, everything from juice fasting to fruit fasting, all the way down to water fasting. And that cyclic fasting and metabolic training, if you want to call it, is what eventually made the shift. I lost some weight. I took the stress down, and that's what propelled the healing in my body to take care of those lesions for me.
So you chose to incorporate fasting into your life, and through the fasting you healed. I have 2 questions around that. Number 1, so many people are frightened of this idea of fasting, and most people will say, "I can't do it." So I want to talk about that. And then I also want you to explain to us what types of fasting you did, how long. So you mentioned juice fasting, water fasting, ultimately water fasting. Can you go through that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, well, the fasting I did anything I could at that time.
And where were you when you were doing the fasting?
This was in Costa Rica.
In Costa Rica, okay.
So I first did juice fasting because the vegetables were so fresh and organic and abundant there. Then fruit fasting, and then eventually went to water fasting. Everything led me to water fasting.
Everything led you to water fasting. And how long did you do your water fasts?
At the time, it was going from 3 to 5 days. It wasn't until later that I really understood what's going on, and I extended them. I would do several 12 days. I've gone up to 30 days
of water fasting.
Of water fasting. They all end up being water fasting. I'll explain that in a second. And now we've worked with dozens of people to do the same thing. We've worked with large populations, thousands of people to do these little rotational concepts, mildly, but not calling it fast, to get through and help their programs and their health. And
What do you call it?
Well, we call one of them rotational meal timing. Just like there's another set of terms you can't go to, and that's called intensity exercise. High intensity interval training, things like that. Can't say that, so we learned to say variable output exercise.
Nice.
Because we wanted to move people away from physical activity, getting more steps, parking farther from their
Right.
job, and little things like that, to really learning how to create a hormonal-based exercise program for themselves that they can do, short period of time. It's a little bit harder, but it's so much more effective, and it goes hand in hand with the fasting from a metabolic side of what's going on in the body.
So you suffered from metabolic abnormality.
Yes, I had metabolic syndrome twice in my life. Once was right before I made this program for the population health. I moved to Seattle from New York where we were living, and I was living by myself, and I was finding a home for my family, and I was doing this, working this new job, and started to gain some weight, because my weight has gone up and down over the years. So in realizing that I developed metabolic syndrome, I want to know, what is this process? This is a pre-diabetic, potentially a pre-heart disease, pre-cancerous, pre-metabolic issue developing in my body, and I wanted to know what it was.
How did you know that this was developing in your body? I mean, so many people are going to be watching you right now and say, gosh, am I at this place? Do I have metabolic syndrome? What is metabolic syndrome?
Well, I was working with population health,
Right.
and we screen people through biometric events. And so I was at a biometric event. I was testing the machine, and I did my biometrics, and my numbers were off. There's 5 elements that are part of the criteria for metabolic syndrome. One of them is high blood pressure. So anything over the normal is considered one criteria. Another one is to have low good cholesterol or low HDL. You can look those numbers up. It's different for men and women, but if those go low, that's another one. Another one is to have high triglycerides, which most people get tested on any cholesterol panel they get if that starts to go high. Another one is to have high fasting blood sugar, which is anything over 100. Not quite diabetic, but it's anything over 100 and considered pre-diabetes in that element. Another one is increased in your waist circumference.
So if it's a certain,
If men get over, right at their belly button,
Yeah.
in a soft measuring tape, if they go over 40 inches, you're in that category.
Right.
That's a criteria positive.
and women's like 35 or something.
Exactly, 35. So any two, depending on where you look at, any 2 to 3 of those, you're considered to have metabolic syndrome.
Oh, fascinating. So
And-
for everyone that's listening, figure it out. If we have 2 or 3, then we're in that metabolic syndrome state, and that's a precursor, or that's leading down a path of,
Yeah. Don't wait for your doctor. These are things you can test at home. You can't test the cholesterol. You can get your last blood test and look at that for an
Yes.
idea, but you can measure your own waist.
Right.
You can look online how to do that.
Yep.
You can buy a glucometer for $12 at the local pharmacy, or they might even do it there for you and test your blood sugar and take a look at that and see where you're at. You can test your own blood pressure. Now they have smart everything, right? They have smart blood pressure cuffs that go right to your phone and track everything. They have smart scales that'll tell you your percentage body fat, lean body mass, and you can, again, track it on your scale. We use smart thermometers. I even use a smart jump rope in my practice because it can track these different things, not to mention your different activity devices that can do so much more. So don't wait. Go to your doctor, ask for these things, and start to check what you can check at home, because it's happening. It's so prevalent that the majority of adult Americans out there right now are either type 2 diabetic or have pre-diabetes.
wait, hold on. Say that again?
Right now, as we're sitting here,
Uh-huh.
over 50%, over half, 1 in 2 American adults are either type 2 diabetic or have pre-diabetes, which means they're going down that road. It's over 55% right now.
Wow.
And the CDC estimates that 1 in 3 kids right now, born after 2000, will go on to get type 2 diabetes. That's triple the amount right now. And so here's how I think about it. My wife and I, we're 2 adults.
Right.
Who's going to get it? Hopefully me, because I don't want my queen to get anything, right? But who's going to get it? We're 2 adults. One of us, according to the statistics, I have 3 kids, all born after 2000. Which one of them is going to get it? We represent that statistic. That can happen to me, even though I work in this, just as easy it can happen to anybody else out there.
So what are the strategies? You've spoken about fasting and water fasting. What are the key strategies if we test to be in that metabolic state, right? Where we have metabolic syndrome, what do we do next?
Yeah, and another thing you look at, if you gain any weight over the last year, it only has to be 4.4 pounds, they estimate, and you're starting to go down that road.
Really?
Yeah, the tape measure is a great one to do. We almost have to live as if we have it. We have to assume that either it's going or we're going down that road, because the culture, the lifestyle, the diet of the American public is what leads it down that road. So now let's give you some free takeaway gifts, right? What can we start doing now, whether you got this going on or not, or you're waiting to be tested or not? The first step we tell people to do is eat 3 meals a day. Not 5, not 7, 3 meals. It can be as simple as breakfast, lunch, and dinner with no snacking in between, before or after. Not even a healthy snack. No almonds here or apples with peanut butter. Just whatever you're going to eat it in 3 meals a day.
Do you think that applies to children as well as adults?
Children, a little harder to say. Maybe a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they get 4 because they're growing. Adults, we're not in the growth state. Everything that people talk about, oh, well, my body is growing, I want to grow anew, I'm healing, it's really not a growth state, it's a repair state, right? And it's a different metabolic concept, it's a different metabolic thing. So adults, we want to be in repair, we want to be in healing. Kids, they're growing, or the pregnant mommies, they're in growth state too. But so they're a little bit different. They might have a little bit more leeway as far as that goes. But anything that you're eating at home, you should be able to eat for everybody. You know how many clients have come in, and I have a virtual practice where I talk to on the phone. It doesn't matter if it's Australia, Europe, here, Canada. And I'll hear, especially from the women, oh, I'm going to do a program with you, and I'm going to eat however you tell me. And then I'm going to make my husband this, because that's what he likes. Ooh. And my kids are picky, so I give my 2 kids this, and the other one eats this. I'm like, that's 4 different menus. How is that going to be a success? Anything that you want to incorporate to improve your health as an adult needs to be able to be applied to everybody. You cannot be standalone. The longevity, you're in trouble. You can't win. Right. And B, you're sending your kids down a path you're trying to get off of. Because if one of those 3 of those kids right now are going to go on to get type 2 diabetes, it's happening now. They're learning it now. It's hard as a parent to think that I might be contributing to my kids' health in the future, but we are. And so it's not only about help, it's like what they say on the airplane. Put your mask on first, then help the kids and help people who need it. But the good news is it can start in the household and everyone can do it together. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't have to be a diet. This is a lifestyle change. We want to get off the road. We might not know where this change will take us, but we know where not making that change goes. And that's the 1 and 2 adults and 1 and 3 kids.
Wow. So you found out for the second time in your life that you had metabolic syndrome. And you applied, I'm sure, these principles that you're sharing with us now. So the first one was going to 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
Then what? What did you do?
Well, first thing is you shift to 3 meals a day, no snacking. Simple as that. Don't have to count calories. Don't have to change much at that point. Then once you got that down, it could take a week. Some people can take a month. When you're eating 3 meals a day and you're happy with that, then you start to look at the quality. First thing I tell people to do is add fat to every meal.
Add fat to every meal.
Don't take it, because everyone was ready. Like, what are you going to take away from me?
Right.
What do I want that you're not going to let me eat? Nothing. First, eat 3 meals a day. Didn't change anything you're eating.
Yeah.
Second, add fat to every meal as an ingredient. So it's on your plate. It's in your meal. It's not just in your pan when you cook things. It's there. Fat's as an ingredient. Then once you got that down, a week, 2 weeks, whatever you need, then the next thing you do is you take away something else, maybe grains or maybe sugar, or you start to go down that road. But in those first 2 weeks, just by going 3 meals a day, I had people in my population health programs lose 60, 65 pounds.
Wow.
And all they did is shift to eating 3 meals a day. They were telling me they were doing other things. The coaches were like, I don't know if they're doing it or not. And then we actually checked all their surveys. That's really all they did.
And then you have them add fat to every meal.
Yeah.
Tell us about the kind of fat you want them to add, the amount of fat.
Basically any natural fat. Any fat that's not man-made. So a man-made fat is like margarine. It's like Crisco. It's like vegetable oils.
Yes.
Things like that. Things that you think of, like olive oil. You squeeze an olive. We lived in Spain. We had the orchards in our backyard. You squeeze an olive, oil comes out. That makes sense. But now think of corn. You squeeze corn. You ever see corn oil come out of that corn? No, it's made from that ingredient, but it's not made with it exactly the same way, if that makes sense. It's processed.
It does. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so we want to stay away from any fat that's not man-made. So you can, that opens up healthy dairy fats, healthy animal fats. Leave the skin on the chicken. Leave the gristle on the steak. Leave the yolks in the egg. Add some olives. Add some avocado. Add some oil and vinegar. Get creative with it. Go make some sauces. I love to have a hollandaise sauce. I'll dip anything in a hollandaise sauce. And as long as you're working down that road and you continue, you don't just stop there and add fat to your sandwich roll or to your cake, then you keep going down with the progression, you'll start to see that change just compound. It goes downhill in a good way, so to speak.
Right.
And what happens is, as we go to 3 meals a day, we're making a hormonal shift. The whole thing, I mentioned the diabetes prevention program. The reason our program looks entirely different than like the national programs that are out there, than like your doctor probably participates in, is because they're looking through a lens of blood sugar. I changed the lens to look at it differently, hormonally, and so we're looking through a lens that's insulin-based. Not blood sugar, but insulin. And when we did, it's like putting on rose-colored glasses. The whole environment changed. Some of the things that we were doing didn't make so much sense. Some of the things that we saw that did make sense, we didn't know why, now we knew why, happened. You change from a blood sugar to a hormonal point of view, the whole environment changes and you have a lot of different options, and that's where the progression to a higher fat, moderate protein, lower carb model of eating, what eventually became paleo, and now as you go even further, it's called keto or ketogenic. We used to call it the basic human eating plan.
Interesting. The basic human eating plan.
People want to know, what do I eat? You eat the basic human eating plan. And the problem is not many people know what we're supposed to eat, indigenous, eating.
Yeah.
So it came down to, that's when you're at that step, you're at 3 meals a day, you've added the fat,
How much fat are you adding? Just so that people can think.
2 thumbs,
2 thumbs.
yep.
Yeah.
2 handfuls of green veg, 1 palm to a palm and a half of protein, with fat's fine, and 2 thumbs of fat. That's our I-hand model.
So 2 thumbs of fat is what? Like if you
Quarter of an avocado.
Uh-huh.
It could be 6 big olives
Yes.
or something like that. It can be a little ramekin of a sauce, or
Got
put
it.
an extra 2 tabs of butter on your veggies,
Right.
things like that.
So you've shared with us these strategies and how they can impact and really transform people's lives. I mean, tremendous, tremendous results. What's going on inside? Why is this happening?
Well, I like to focus on what I call metabolic nutrition. So we talked about metabolic syndrome. People are aware, or they think they are, if they have a high metabolism, a low metabolism. People have these programs and diets to boost their metabolism. They think about their thyroid related to metabolism, stress related to metabolism. That word metabolism can be a big word and kind of ambiguous to people, but I break it down to one simple thing. Metabolism is how your body uses energy. Period. When you think metabolism, think energy. And if you think energy, you have to think about the cell, because it happens within our cells. So each one of our cells has these little furnaces called mitochondria that make our energy that we use for everything else in our body. There's only 2 fuels that you can put into that furnace to burn. You can either put in sugar or glucose, or you can put in fat in the form of ketones. But that's it. You can either burn sugar or burn fat. That fuels your metabolism, and everything else is basically downstream. How you feel, energy that you have, your ability to concentrate, your ability to work out, your strength, all trickles down from what your cells are burning most of the time. And as it turns out, when you burn sugar, it's like having a fireplace full of nice big logs. They burn hot, but they make a lot of smoke. They leave a lot of soot, and there's a lot of smell, right? Versus fat, when you think about fat, think of your natural gas stove. When you turn that on, there's no smoke, there's no soot, it doesn't smell. Very different. Both are burning energy. One's burning the wood in your fireplace, that's sugar. The other one's burning the propane on your gas, and that's fat. So bringing that back to our body, we want our body to burn the most efficient, the most effective fuel possible, and that's fat. And so most people have been living so long burning sugar, it's hard to switch over to burning fat. It's hard to make that switch. It doesn't switch like a light switch on and off. It's more like a big dial. You have to turn that dial, and that needle's got to change, and it can be a little bit difficult. But like any other mechanism in our body, if we train it, if we get in metabolic shape to become a fat burner, we'll be better off for it, and we'll get better at it. Just like working out. You can't do the same workout every single day, the same way, the same intensity. You expect to be all that much different in a year. You got to change it up. You got to challenge yourself. Same thing. You got to work that metabolic fitness into your life by what you eat, when you eat, how you think, and how you move. You put those all together, and you'll start to change that dial, and you'll get better at it, better at it, better at it. In the beginning, it might be awkward. Dropping sugar can be a challenge for anybody. Dropping wheat or grains can be a challenge. We get that. But if you do this week by week process, the hormones change before you know it. And as you make these changes, 3 meals a day, add the fat, then start taking things out, already your insulin levels have gone down. Your stress levels on a hormonal level have gone down. The hunger driving hormones have chilled out a little bit. What makes you feel satisfied with your meal has gone up, and you don't even know it. And so now as you make these bigger changes, like I could never give up sugar or bread, guess what? Well, it wasn't as hard as I thought. Then you move from there, we say, okay, now you're eating 3 meals a day. You're adding fat to every meal. You're cutting out grains and sugar. You don't have to go to 0, but you're cutting it out. Now, every other day, just skip breakfast and do everything else the same. Oh, skip breakfast. It was hard. I couldn't believe I was dropping snacks. But guess what? They can do it because you've already set the body up. It feels different. Think of this. Everyone's gone through dieting. It's miserable. Calorie counting, low calorie concepts every day, white knuckling it, hungry all the time, growling stomach, waking up hungry. I've been through it. I've done it a million times, unfortunately. But here's the deal. If we could turn all those hormones around and make it so that you're not driven by hunger, you don't have any cravings, you're not influenced by what we think is emotional eating, what wouldn't you change? We can bring people to that state naturally, and at that point, they'll do whatever I tell them. I'll say, okay, now you're going to eat cardboard for the next week. They'll say, okay, can I use salt and pepper on that? Fine. It's not hard because all those things that drive us and kill us in that traditional diet concept are gone. Now we can make the changes we want. We can even get into real fasting, where we skip breakfast, or breakfast and lunch, or who knows, maybe even the whole day, and build on that because you've become more metabolically fit. You've trained that muscle, that dial's turned over, and you can handle it. Just like some people think of running a 10K is impossible. But if you start with a quarter mile, you move to a mile, you move to 5 miles, now 10K, which is 6 miles, is not that big a deal. You just don't go right to it. If you do that, you might get through it, but it'll be difficult, right? Same thing.
When you had this metabolic syndrome, and it was the second time in your life, you needed to make these changes. And I love that you're giving us these really clear strategies. You've transformed, I believe, millions of people's lives with these strategies, but it all started with you, right? You walked the walk and you made that transformation. How long did it take for you to go from metabolic syndrome to metabolic flexibility, that strength training within your metabolism?
To answer the question directly, the first time it took 12 weeks.
Okay.
That's what it took. I lost the weight, I changed the numbers, but it didn't really stick until I changed my thinking from weight, because I wanted to lose weight. Mm-hmm. Like anyone, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm 25 pounds less than I graduated high school with. This is
right now?
Right now.
Wow.
And I still got some room to go. But I learned you can be metabolically healthy and still overweight. We're not talking morbidly obese, on the far end, but you can be in that. And so my first thing was, okay, if I'm going to work on my weight, first thing I need to know is that I'm metabolically healthy. I'm doing those tests. I'm doing the things that I need to do. Then I can work on the weight. And it'll come according to my genetics, according to my metabolic history. Like the dieting we're talking about, I should definitely beat myself up over the years with sports, and I've done powerlifting competitions, bulked up and cut down. I got some scars on that. Mm-hmm. But at least I know that I'm in the metabolic range, and that's where we need to start. So people don't freak out about the number on the scale. We're talking about weight, we're talking about weight loss, but the first weight and the first fat that has to come off our body will never show up on a number on the scale to get you healthy. All it takes is 1 gram of fat to make you diabetic. People ask all the time, how much, I'm type 2 diabetic, how much weight do I have to lose to be no longer type 2 diabetic? I tell them 1 gram. Well, wait a minute, my doctor said I have to lose 10% of my body. I'm like, no, it's 1 gram. But what if I'm 400 pounds versus someone who's 200 pounds? 1 gram. How can that be? Because that 1 gram is stuck in your pancreas that makes your insulin and controls your blood sugar. You take that out, and no matter what your weight says, you're now metabolically more healthy. That's all it takes.
It's an empowering thought.
1 gram.
Yeah.
So as you beat yourself up over the 20 pounds for summer or whatever we do to ourselves, and I know we all do it, focus on that 1 gram. Because here's the deal. Our liver and our pancreas get loaded with fat just like our body does. But this body fat that you can see and pinch, it's not all that dangerous. We don't like it. But that fat on the inside, that'll kill us. That's what drives the metabolic syndrome. That's got to come out first. And here's the secret. You can't burn the body fat until that's gone. It's like putting your mask on first, we talked about for the kids. That liver's got to take care of herself. We call it a soccer mom because she does everything for everybody at her own expense. So that soccer mom's got to clean up her act. And once she gets fit, then she can handle, because that's where our body fat gets burned off, through our liver. No way that's coming off if that liver's not healthy, happy, and at ease.
So we have to teach our liver to put
Yeah.
her oxygen mask on first.
Yeah, we take that soccer mom, we send her to the Bahamas, put her on a beach, we'll fan her down and give her a Mai Tai for a while, and we take care of her. Once she is back in a good spot, then she'll handle the rest, like she always has. But if we try to put the cart before the horse and force off that body fat, all we're going to do is slam that soccer mom. Do more, do more, do more, when she's already at her wit's end. You know, can't do that. You got to go the other way around. And so we focus on the metabolism, or these metabolic numbers, the blood sugar, blood pressure, insulin, different hormones. Don't have to get caught up in them, but you focus on them, get healthy in that first, and everything else will change. Otherwise, you can probably force off 10, 15, 20 pounds traditional dieting, but all you're doing is taking a big pear-shaped person and making them a little pear-shaped person. But they're still a pear-shaped person, and that metabolic is not good. You change those numbers, you change that function inside that person, now everything changes. And that's when their body constitution changes. Muscle can go up, fat can come down, and their actual shape of their body will change.
How long does it take to become a body fat burner in your experience, which ultimately is going to work to change that shape, right?
To become a fat burner, let's not get overcomplicated or take an extreme or the other. We don't live in fat burning. Just because you're changing the dial, it's about metabolic flexibility. The whole reason we train, like to run that race, is not to run the race. The point of a race isn't the number or the trophy, right? The point of the race is to be able to run the race with relative ease and not have a problem, to be able to be in shape to do it. That's the goal. Same thing, to be metabolically flexible. We want to be able to burn fat whenever we want and burn sugar when we need to and go back and forth, easy peasy. But most people are stuck on that sugar side. And so, as we go over, it can take anywhere from 2 weeks. One woman, it took 5.5 months. She came to my office, she took a CT scan, a picture of her liver, 2.5 times bigger than normal. I told her, I said, ma'am, this is not the right place for you. You need to go to the hospital. That's a medical emergency. She said, no. I've been to all that. I've done it for years. I'm tired of it. If you can't help me, no one's going to help me. So we went to work. She was overweight. We worked and did all these different things. Lifestyle, diet, when to eat, what to eat, exercise, everything we could. She did everything. 1 month, nothing. 2 months, nothing. 3 months, nothing. I'm going, oh man, what's going on? 4 months, nothing. Then at the 5.5 month point, something shifted. And that month she lost 25 pounds. The next month she lost another 30 pounds. And she took another CT scan and then the liver was back to normal. That liver was working on itself for months and months. She was doing what she's supposed to do. How many people out there think, I'm doing everything I'm being told to do and I'm getting worse?
Right.
Or I'm not losing weight. How many can eat better than I eat, exercise every day, and at the end of the month go up 2 pounds? And you want to pull your hair out. No matter what the program is, you're doing it, you're doing all the right things and the weight's not coming off or you're not seeing the change you're looking for. Why? Because your body's working. This program is working. It's just not working on what you want it to work on first. It's working on the inside. It's clearing that stuff out. That woman had to get that, and man, she's happy she did. But what if she gave up after a month?
Well, that's the question. So was she metabolically abnormal, or was this specific to her liver?
Well, both.
Okay.
We all have a metabolic history. If we've gone up and down in weight, in high school, I went from wrestling to football. I sucked weight like in very unhealthy ways to drop my weight to be the lightest I could to wrestle. Then I was a lineman, so I'd put on another 40 pounds for football, and that's bad news. I didn't do it in a healthy way. And so that's a scar. Going up and down, every time we go up and down 20, 30, 40 pounds, it can leave a little scar. Not that we can't overcome it, but that's part of our history. It's part of who we are.
When you say a scar, you're talking about a metabolic scar?
I'm talking about, it's an analogy. There might not physically be a scar
Correct.
there, but there is an impact
Right.
that we're working with. So she had done a lot of things. She had gone through some different things with like diet pills and other things. So we had to get past that, her relationship with all of that too, and then give it time. When you're doing the right things, you just keep doing them.
Right.
Eventually things will kick in and you'll see the window that you're looking for.
Very interesting. So in her case, she had you to be her cheerleader and to guide her 5.5 months, how many of us after a month are just going to say, time out, I quit, it's done, and not give ourselves the opportunity to really do that healing on the inside? I think that's probably a pretty high number. So how do we support all of the people that are watching this right now that say, I've tried everything, it didn't work, I'm just going to live my life this way? What do you say to those people, and how do they get some strategies pulled together to stay on that path?
I get it all. For those of us who need to do the extra, it's very frustrating. So there's a couple things that help a lot. One is you got to commit. And don't do anything if it's not 6 months or longer. Don't make any change that doesn't last at least a month, but it's part of that 6-month plan.
I see.
You have to go after. If you do something for a week and that's just, you're not going to do it. Your body is stubborn. Your body is resentful. Your body's going like, oh, you're changing something? I know what you're doing. Go ahead, have fun. This is not just another gimmick. This is a change and go. So you got to commit the time. And you got to be ready to commit the resources, which is a lot of time as well, time in your day, planning things out. Cooking when you might not want to cook, shopping when you might not want to shop. It all helps. Reaching out to a professional when you think you can do it yourself. 90% of my virtual clients are doctors or nurses, medical doctors, chiropractors, nutritionists. These are people in the field. We all need a coach. We all need some extra help. We all need a guiding hand, right? We all need that. And so don't be afraid to reach out, whatever that is for you. It doesn't have to be me or my program or anyone else in particular. Just look for it and find your tribe, find your community, and give yourself that time and stick with it. You know how many days I wasted saying it's not fair? This shouldn't be this way?
Right.
I know more. I grew up differently. Guess what? It happens. And so you got to deal with it. You got to go. Because we might not always know what's going to change and when by doing something new. But we know if we go back to our old ways, we know where we're going.
Right.
There's no change in that. And we don't want to go there.
As a country, we're compliant, right? We're told to follow these food guidelines, and we do. And despite the compliance, we're continuing to be told, oh, we're lazy, we don't move enough, we don't exercise enough. And there's this constant sort of like negative reinforcement, I think, on all of us in this country. What do you say to that?
I don't even know what the word is for it. We are biased at best. And we're prejudiced at worst about weight and about who gains weight, who can't lose weight, who is obese, and so forth. A lot of it's not due to lack of effort. A lot of times it's because they followed that advice to the T over time that they got there. It just happens to be that information over time was wrong or misguided. If one more doctor says to me, oh, you got a fat patient and all they have to do is eat less and exercise more, I'm going to kick them in the shins.
Yeah.
Because they got there following stuff. People put a lot of effort in, They track things, they invest in things, they do these things. They just got to make sure they get on the right path for them. The old model is flawed and wrong. We now have 60 years of low-calorie dieting, of 5 to 7, 8, 9 meals a day, of blood sugar-based programs. They lead us down the wrong path. We were wrong. The body is smart. The body is super smart. And the way we came up with it is twofold. One, low-calorie diet. Why low-calorie diets fail? It's because your body is smart. Think of the food you'd come in as your paycheck, right? You get money. Say you make $1,000 a month, right? You're taking in calories, whatever we want. That's our paycheck. Now, if suddenly you go, okay, I'm going to cut my paycheck by 30%, you're going to go on a low-calorie diet. What normally happens? If it was your paycheck, you don't keep spending $1,000 because you'll go bankrupt. You budget. You might not go out to eat as much. You might not get the kids the braces. I don't know. We might not get the mani-pedi. You might not, whatever it is that we do, we cut it back. The body does the same thing. All right, you're not feeding me as much. I'm going to budget. And it starts to create workarounds and start to work with it. That's why you can lose a little bit of weight, but then you balance out. Then you cut it back a little bit more. Now I don't get $1,000. I went from 1,000 to 700. Now I'm going to go to 500. Well, guess what? If it was your budget in your pocket, you do the same thing. You might turn off the heat in the house for a month. You might not get the big cell phone package or what you budget. Your body does the same thing. And what happens is that metabolism goes down and down and down to meet the money coming in, meet the food coming in. Then you're like, forget this. This is miserable. I can hardly sleep. I can hardly function. So I'm going to go back to normal. And your body's stuck at spending at 50% and you just doubled its pay. It's just going to go up. It's going to take all that in and store it. That's the rebound.
Dr. Klum, so with the millions of people that you've helped to transform their lives, you've also helped some of the most sophisticated experts out there.
Yeah, well, I get best of both worlds. I'm a client, I'm a patient because I have to deal with this. And
Yes.
I want to get it better for me, to not pass it on to my kids. And then when I learn something, I share it with other people. That's my goal. And some of those people are the practitioner. I also have the education of the other side as a healthcare practitioner. Those are my people. That's my community. So I can communicate with them differently than I could someone on the street. You know, the population health programs that we mentioned, some of those clients were truck drivers and factory workers who had maybe 5th, 6th grade education. Great people, but you have to speak very differently than some of the hospital systems that we worked with. We had entire hospital systems from administrative staff to neurosurgeons go through some of these programs that I designed, and these are very educated in health professionals. And there was things that they didn't know and that they wanted to learn and that they did themselves, and they got results that they've never gotten before. One cardiac surgeon even said, I wish we learned this in medical school, right? In order to see a change and make a change, we got to do something differently. We got to try hard to look at it differently, apply it differently to get that different outcome. It is the same thing here.
So how did we get to where we are today with statistics that you've shared with us? How did we get here?
Well, in medicine and in the government, we tend to lock onto things pretty easy, and we don't like to let go, right? So over the years, it makes sense that if you eat too much, you put on weight. You want to get rid of the weight, you eat less, and so forth. That makes sense, but when you add in the environmental exposure to stress, when you add in the chemicals that are in food, water, air, and everything around us that affects our body, that's another one. And when you add in the hormonal response, we have to understand that we now know, which we didn't know then, what hormones are. You know, insulin was discovered in 1927. You know, 1923 to 1927 when it started to come out in the studies. That's not that long we've been dealing with this. These diets were made up and locked in before we learned about the hunger hormone, ghrelin. We didn't even know it existed. Or the satiation hormone of leptin that controls fat burning. It didn't exist in our world, and we're building these programs. We're saying we got the answer before we had all the information. And once we got the information, we are very reluctant to make that change. That's the problem with big institutions. They're not against us. It's not a conspiracy against us. It's just, it can take 25 years to get one thought through a quarter-inch of skull in some of these programs. And once the new information came in, we just didn't change. And that's what we're about now. So we want to know, what is the ideal diet? That's what led us to the ketosis concept. What I wanted to do, I was thinking about it. Fasting is not eating. Drinking water, not eating. But the body continues. The longest recorded fast is 382 days. Person didn't die. Lost a lot of weight. Didn't get malnourished. Didn't go crazy. Was able to do it. It was a medically supervised fast. When people fast, their energy actually goes up if you measure it by their blood, their adrenaline and all the good hormones that control our energy, no matter how they feel. Human growth hormone goes up. They actually put on a little bit of muscle. They start to burn the fat. The whole body goes into all these changes. You'll hear a lot of talk about autophagy, how the body breaks down the cells it doesn't need, and how it creates new cells from stem cells. New cells from stem cells, brand new cells to replace the old cells. It's a whole transformation process that happens with fasting. Very natural. So I was like, this is fantastic.
Talk about autophagy for a minute. So it won the Nobel Prize in 2016. It's one of the areas where I have the greatest passion because I think that autophagy can be the biggest word when you look at something like where inflammation is. We all understand inflammation in today's world. I want autophagy to be as big a word as inflammation, and people understand how it can impact their health.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two big sides to this. This is where fasting I think has most of its power. There's two sides to this process. One is autophagy, and the other is stem cell genesis. Okay, two different sides. What is autophagy? To fasting, remember the benefit of doing a fast, 5 days, 7 days, is not to wear the badge of honor, it's to be able to do it. Because what happens in that time is two main things. One, the body sends out this scan like across a radar and finds any cells that are slacking, that are broken, that are too old, that need to be replaced. And it chops them down, recycles them.
That's autophagy.
That's autophagy, breaking down cells. Those cells that get broken down, they don't get flushed out, they get made into new proteins for muscle. That's how we keep our muscle when we fast. You know, against popular belief. That's how we can fuel our immune system. You can make glucose when you're not eating from those broken cells and keep the body going. It's not starving. Fasting is no more starving as drinking water is drowning. So that's autophagy. That's one side of the equation. But that makes room for the other side, which gets me more excited, even the defragmentation of our system that happens in autophagy. This is cleansing, but it opens up opportunity. The other side of the equation is the body will actually start to make brand new cells. Brand new. There's two types of cell growth. One is division, where one cell splits and becomes two. This is traditional. This is how we age. This is how disease things kick in because we're just replicating old cells. Another way is to make a brand new cell from a stem cell. A stem cell is a cell that's like a baby cell. It hasn't become anything yet. It doesn't have all the influences that we have as adult cells and so on. It's a brand new cell, and it goes in and it can form any tissue in the body. So with those new cells, those cell genesis, that's stem cell genesis, that cell can go around the body and make part of your heart brand new. New cells. New genetic line on those cells. Go to your liver, go to your pancreas, go to your muscles, go to your brain. We can actually regrow connections in the brain and even nerve cells, which some of our books still say is impossible, that evolution of thought. So that's the other side. We break down old cells so that at the same time, in the same state, we can create brand new cells and repopulate our entire body. Essentially, slow down aging that way. Because these have a new cell line. They have a new genetic line. It's like a baby cell. We can just get brand new cells all over. It can even happen in our skin, and it can happen all over the place. But we need both.
Yeah.
And you have to do it in the right way. And you have to be metabolically flexible and metabolically fit. Otherwise, you're just suffering through not eating, and you're not creating genesis, or if you create them, you don't keep them. One of the bad things is when people do a fast, they don't do it right. They don't prepare, or they don't give it enough time, or when they come off, they go eat pizza and beer, and next thing you know, all those brand new baby cells are out of here. We can't keep them. Up to 98% will take off if you don't have the right environment. And a big part of that, exercise.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that, with activating autophagy. So if we think of autophagy almost as like a little Pac-Man inside of our cells, and it's helping to really get us to repair, which you told us is what we need to do as adults. We shouldn't be thinking about growing. We're not growing, we're repairing. So if that autophagy is activated, if it's through exercise, if it's through fasting, if it's through sleeping with the circadian rhythms, all of these allow us to then build those new stem cells?
Yes, the stem cells, they come from our bone marrow, from our spleen, from our immune system, different places, and go around the body, and they get into the organs and they start to repopulate. They take some of the space that was made from the autophagy. Okay, so now we've got these brand new cells, but if we don't continue the right lifestyle, they just get killed off and go. We always have autophagy going on, but when we fast or we eat a certain way, like ketogenics, or we're exercising a certain way, hormonally, metabolically fit, that goes up, 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 up.
Yep.
So a lot of opportunity. Repopulate this body with brand new cells from those stem cells is going, but now that they're there, if we don't continue on some sort of plan or path, remember we talked about at least a 6-month concept and doing all these different things that you mentioned, working on sleep, working on stress resilience, not stress management. Forget managing stress. I want to become resilient to it. It means I want to make my stress in my life work for me, not break me down. I want to build me up, not break me down. You got to learn what to eat as well as when to eat, the timing and all that kind of stuff. And then we got to work on an exercise progression. There's all different ways to exercise. They all give us different benefits, but as part of a bigger picture, if you do that, you break down the bad stuff, you replenish with brand new cells, and then you keep them for a lifetime.
You had skin cancer. You used fasting to heal. You talked a little bit about this 30-day fast. Can you share with us that experience and how you dealt with it?
Well, I incorporate all sorts of different kinds of fasting. And so a 12 to 30-day fast, we've done that a few times. I've done that a few times. It didn't start off as a 30-day fast. It started off as a 3-day fast. Feeling pretty good? Oh, let's make it 5. Let's go to 7. Let's go to 10. Now I'm at 12, which was like my longest before, so I'll go to 14. And next thing you know, it moves on. And I was speaking on stage at a seminar, and another speaker said, hey, Don's going for 30 days. I'm like, it's only 23. So I had to keep going. So I kept going. But after a certain point, it's not hard. The only part that's hard is the social part. I like the rest. You sleep well, you look younger. I get my fasting face, which is very nice. It's nice and thin. It's got a different look to it. And you get all these different benefits. And after a while, it's not hard at all. I could have went 40 days. I could have kept going. Hard part is getting to that part where you're flexible and you're metabolically fit to ride out the beginning to get there. The guy that did 382 days, he could have kept going. He was not suffering. You don't suffer through this. And I did full scans of my body. I took blood tests. I took hormone tests. I monitored everything. It all went well. But doing the smaller fast, the rotational fast, the intermittent fasting, a fat fasting every other day, skipping breakfast concept, trains you to work your way up to that. I work with people on 6-month programs. Every one of them on week 13 is a 7-day water fast. And when people sign up, they're like, I don't know about this. I want, they're ready to run for the hills. But we work through it, and not one person have I ever worked with one-on-one couldn't get through that 7-day and didn't do it surprisingly well. And along the way, everyone says, even on the big population groups, they say that was easier than I thought. So just get your plan, stick to your plan, and you'll watch. You're stronger and you can do more than you think you can. So it'll be easier than you thought.
My goodness, this was so exciting to learn from all your years of research, of work, and also your personal journey is just so remarkable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Exactly the kind of information we need to hear.
That's right, Montel. I thought he touched on all of the key points of what we need to know, and he did it in such a fashion that it's easy to implement in our own lives.
I am so glad we are bringing people the real skinny on fat. And, coming up next is Mr. Mark Sisson. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
Mark Sisson's a really interesting guy. So he's a biologist. He's been a triathlete and a marathon runner. And when he was competing and really leading in this field, what was happening is he was carb loading and he was having so much inflammation in his body, so many injuries, that he started to move into the paleo diet.
Ah. And then once he got in the paleo diet, which would really be contrary to a marathoner, but I guess he was shifting.
Yeah.
He's now shifted over even more, right?
That's right. So he's coined this term metabolic flexibility. So he's very much into the high-fat diet, the ketogenic diet, but being able to move between the two is what he brings to the table.
And that's kind of, this journey that we've been on, because you've been trying to get me to move completely over, and I'm moving in that direction, but because, I'm 61 years old, I've been eating this way, and I've been eating pretty much a paleo-style diet for now years.
Oh, yeah.
I'm shifting over and trying to get more fat in my diet so that I can try to get more of the things that I keep converting to sugar out. Mm-hmm. So I get it. I probably won't be that 100% ketogenic person, but I'm going to be that 75% ketogenic person.
And that's exactly what Mark Sisson talks about.
That's great. Let's take a look at this.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to learn so much from you. Can you tell us your name and a little bit about your background?
I'm Mark Sisson. I'm a former endurance athlete turned researcher in the health and wellness field. I have a blog called Mark's Daily Apple, wherein I espouse a lifestyle based on an evolutionary principle. The basic goal of this blog and all of the books that I've written are to improve metabolic flexibility, and that is really the essence of what I teach people. It's basically how to become really good at burning fat and to become less reliant on glucose.
So you started as an athlete. How old were you when you began?
I was 12 when I began. I really, I started at a very early age with an eye toward, literally toward improving my health and my longevity, if you can believe that.
At 12 years old?
At 12 years old, I started thinking about what it would take to live longer. From those ages of 12, 13, 14, I read all the books I could get my hands on that had to do with health and longevity. I started running because Ken Cooper had written a book called Aerobics, which indicated that the more aerobic activity you did, the better it was for your heart, and the better your heart was, the longer you'd live. So I went down this path of pursuing longevity and performance, which morphed into my becoming a top endurance athlete through college and then after college, ultimately doing marathons and triathlons. And ironically, through this pursuit of performance and becoming a faster runner, I realized I was sacrificing the health and longevity that I had originally sought. That became kind of an ironic reason for me to quit racing so hard and to delve deeply into the research on how the body works and what it is about our genetic recipe that wants us to be strong, lean, fit, happy, healthy, and productive, but the ways in which we thwart that natural tendency with the lifestyle choices that we make. So the rest of my career, the last 35 years, has been devoted to finding these hidden genetic switches that we all have that we can use to manifest the healthy, strong, lean, fit body that will live a long time.
So when you started to notice that you were performing at this incredible rate, but you were breaking down on the inside, what were you noticing? What was going on?
So in order to put in the inordinate number of miles that it took to become a top endurance athlete, I had to find a way to fuel that activity. And the conventional wisdom of the day was to fuel with lots of carbohydrate, to take in lots of pasta and cereal and bread and even some sugary drinks. There were a lot of sports drinks that were coming on the market then. But the idea was that that your entire athletic performance was hinged on the access to carbohydrates, whether it was glycogen stored in the muscles or whether it was your exogenous feeding of carbohydrate during your training and your activities or your races. So through the years of taking in vast quantities of carbohydrate, I recognized that I was putting in a lot of miles, but I was starting to become inflamed throughout my body. I started to have arthritis in my feet, tendonitis in my hips. I had irritable bowel syndrome that dictated pretty much every move I made throughout the day. I had upper respiratory tract infections several times a year, lingering sinus infections. It was crazy that I was trying to be this picture of health. And on the outside, if you looked at me, and I was on the cover of Runner's World magazine 3 times, and you know, I looked every bit the fit athlete, but on the inside, I really was falling apart. I really was destroying my health.
So as a biologist, you're in school, you're learning about these, you know, Darwinian principles and you're understanding sort of our primal nature, right? Like primal is you, that's who Mark is, this primal individual. And so you're learning this in school, you're a biologist, and yet you're experiencing this intense aggravation of your body through this exercise. How do you bring it all together? Where does it go?
Well, it was an evolution in my own development. It was sort of a blind homage that I paid to the conventional wisdom that said you should be eating large quantities of carbohydrates. So even though my research was indicating that perhaps grains were antithetical to health, I'd read a lot about anti-nutrients in grains and the gluten in particular and the phytates, and you know, made intellectual sense to me as a scientist. But as a person who was still trying to perform on a national and sometimes a world stage as an endurance athlete, I couldn't just stop eating those foods. So I was kind of caught up in this cognitive dissonance, if you will, which lasted a few years. And it really wasn't until you know, I kind of reached the end of my rope as an endurance athlete and said, I literally have, my arthritis is so bad that I can't continue to train at the level that I need to. My gut is falling apart from the IBS that I was suffering from. Eventually I developed arthritis in my hands and fingers.
Wow.
And I thought, you know, this just isn't right. And I literally did a 30-day elimination experiment where I chose to not eat grains for 30 days. And it was a huge epiphany for me. Within 30 days, you know, my IBS went away, the arthritis in my fingertips went away. Eventually, the osteoarthritis in my feet went away. Some of the lingering systemic inflammatory signs that I had subsided. I can almost tell you that I felt the best that I had felt since I'd been 14 years old. I mean, it sometimes brings tears to my eyes now to realize that I struggled that long, thinking that it was something else in me, thinking that it was my genetic predispositions, thinking that it was, you know, my type A nature that was causing stress that manifested itself in some of these other issues. So to understand the power of the choices that we make when we eat certain types of food, that's really what incentivized me to start my blog, Mark's Daily Apple, to start writing books about this power that we have to flip on certain genes that allow us to build muscle or that allow us to burn fat, and turn off those genes that cause us to develop type 2 diabetes, or to store excessive amounts of fat, or to suppress the immune system. This incredible power that we have to manifest ourselves, to rebuild, renew, regenerate, recreate ourselves, literally minute by minute, day by day, simply based on the inputs that we give our genes, which in turn are based on the lifestyle choices that we make.
So you started your blog, when did you start it?
2006.
2006. And every day you're putting information out there. So it's just an incredible amount of quality information on these topics. It's insatiable.
Well, thank you. And the irony there is that, or the joke there, I guess, is that, when I started my blog, I thought I'd write something every day for a year. Be Mark's Daily Apple.
Yeah.
And after a year, I will have written everything that I need to say in this realm of health and diet and fitness and exercise. Well, obviously, all that did was open doors to new questions and new paths of exploration. And so for 11 and a half years now, I and my team have written something every day, and it's different every day because there are all these nuances and all these shifts and all these questions that arise and all these rabbit holes that we start to go down once we look at one particular aspect of health, and then a couple of more questions come up. Well, what if I give up grains, what am I going to do about fiber? Because aren't grains the best source of fiber?
So answer the question.
Well, so that question arose. What about fiber?
Yep.
Because there's been a resurgence of interest in the gut biome.
Yes.
And the fact that so much of our health depends on having a healthy gut bacteria. Well, if you don't feed the healthy bacteria in your gut what they need, the substrate, the food that they need to create the short-chain fatty acids that then go on to not only allow them to live, but feed the cells lining the gut and all of the information that these cells put out and all of the signals and transmissions they make, if you don't feed that healthy gut bacteria, your health will subside. So we go back and we looked at the question of, well, wait a minute, a lot of the marketing around grains had to do with an excellent source of fiber. What if you take away the grains? Well, it turns out nothing bad happens as long as you consume vegetables and maybe some starchy, tubers once in a while and some fruit once in a while. And if you do that in a way that mimics an ancestral pattern, that is, eat like a caveman, you're providing plenty of substrate for those healthy gut bacteria. But that wasn't really readily apparent when the first article that I wrote about grains said, well, here's why you shouldn't eat grains. And then somebody said, well, wait a minute, if I don't eat grains, what'll I do in its replacement? I mean, one of my favorite, comebacks to that is, well, how will I eat a sandwich?
Right.
Well, okay, what is it about a sandwich, that makes your life complete? There are other alternatives.
When you look at carbohydrates today and you think about the athlete performing, like if you were coaching the next triathlete, what would you indicate to be the best sort of consumption of carbs and proteins and fats? What would that look like?
Well, it would look a lot different from what it was
Yeah.
back in my day of both training and coaching, because I was a coach for a long time. My main sort of theme right now is developing robust metabolic flexibility. So I try to develop metabolic flexibility and metabolic efficiency. The flexibility means that you're able to extract energy from different substrates within your body. You can extract energy from fat if fat is present, whether that's from food on your plate or whether that's from fat stored on your belly, your butt, your thighs, whatever. It means that you can extract energy from the ketones that you make by having become fat adapted and keto adapted. So the liver makes ketones which become a replacement for glucose. Metabolic flexibility means that you burn even carbohydrate, glucose, when it's available, much more efficiently, so you don't throw off the reactive oxygen species that you would if you were just good at burning sugars. So this metabolic flexibility comes into play in an ordinary person's life because you wind up going through the day burning lots and lots of stored body fat. You can go long periods of time without having to eat or without being hungry. But in an athlete, it becomes really interesting when you realize that you could do a certain amount of work deriving most of your energy from fat. Now, I would train an athlete now to become exceptional at burning fat, and in so doing to become good at making ketones and then burning those ketones in the brain instead of glucose. In other words, obviate the need to take in extraneous feedings or exogenous feedings of glucose, which buys you, again, not only more work output, because so much of the work is being done by the fat, but also there's this theory that in endurance athletes that the brain is the central governor of what's going on. That the reason you bonk or that you hit the wall in a race isn't because your legs have run out of glycogen. It's because your brain, which is used to burning glucose, has run out of glucose. And the brain has run out of fuel. It's run out of the only fuel it knows how to deal with, which is glucose, if you're a sugar burner. And once that low blood sugar hits the brain, it's the brain that says, pull over to the side of the road, let's take a nap. It's the brain that says, time to drop out. It's the brain that says, let's drop the pace from 5 minutes a mile to 7 minutes a mile. If you can train yourself to be fat adapted and keto adapted, and if you can train, and you can literally build the metabolic machinery in the brain to access and burn ketones instead of requiring glucose, then this low blood glucose that happens during a race becomes a non-issue, because you're still providing ketones that enable the brain to say, hey, everything's fine. We don't need to pull over. We don't need to slow the pace down that much. Everything's cool. So this whole central governor theory of the brain takes on a whole new context, a whole new paradigm when you've become fat adapted and keto adapted.
And for an athlete, is it easier and faster to become fat adapted and keto adapted than it is for an average person?
No. To become fat adapted and keto adapted, a lot of this depends on how willing you are to go all in, what sort of background you have in terms of your own history of eating and training, what your goals are. Most people will find, particularly athletes, will find that they can get 80% of the benefits of being keto adapted within 3 weeks.
Within 3 weeks.
Now, it takes another 3 or 4 weeks to become another 10% adapted. So now you can get 90% of your sort of maximum possible shift in energy over 6 to 8 weeks. The next 10% takes probably in some athletes as much as a year. Really? And that's the real kind of sticking point for a lot of athletes who aren't willing to sacrifice an entire season of maybe not performing quite as well as they did when they were a sugar burner to get to that point where they're going to be better than they were. And so that's a huge sacrifice to require of a lot of athletes.
So what does all in mean to you when you say, depending on the time to get all in? What does that really mean?
I think all in means that you are willing to spend days and days and days and weeks where you're consuming less than 50 grams of carbohydrates every day, that you're literally forcing your body to shift over to a different fueling system than it's used to. And again, when an athlete who's been used to burning lots of carbohydrate their entire lives, and this is most of the endurance athlete, I mean, it's 95, 98% of the endurance athletes, it's a big shift, it's a big insult to the body and the brain to say, you know what, we're not going to be getting any more glucose for a while. So we have to start building new metabolic machinery. We have to increase the number of mitochondria. We have to increase the efficiency of those mitochondria in terms of how they put fat through, how they extract energy from fat. Ultimately, it's to the benefit of the athlete to have a lot of mitochondria that are able to burn a lot of fat, because, and this is part of the metabolic flexibility equation, when you become really good at burning fat, it doesn't mean that you sacrifice your ability to burn glucose. You still have this ability to burn glucose, but now you have the capacity to burn fat efficiently, and glucose, and ketones, and almost most importantly, you tend to now be disinclined to be burning protein as a fuel source. And that's one of the major issues that a lot of athletes have. When you're a sugar burner, when you are an athlete who's been carbohydrate dependent your entire life, and you start to go to the well, you start to dig deep, you start to go to that point where you're just about to hit the wall. Some of the things that happen within the body are the body's natural fight or flight syndrome kicking in. This would be, again, where the brain is telling us to run fast.
Right.
We don't have much sugar left, so we're going to have to enter this gluconeogenesis phase where we try to summon all of these different resources to make more glucose. And in the case of an athlete who's been so sugar dependent that that's the only source of fuel that they know, literally the brain sends a signal to the adrenal glands to create cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that then literally looks for opportunities throughout the body to tear down muscle tissue and send the amino acids that it gets from tearing down the muscle tissue to the liver so that the liver can convert it to glucose so that the glucose can be used to fuel the brain. That's not a good situation to be in, and yet that's ultimately what happens to a lot of endurance athletes who go to the well, as we say, who dig so deeply that they're forcing their body to tear down this muscle protein. Now, if you're an athlete, muscle is like, that's the thing that,
Absolutely.
that you're kind of counting on to retain and to make you more powerful and more efficient. So losing muscle through this emergency gluconeogenesis process is not a good thing. It's assumed by every endurance athlete up to now that it's sort of a natural state of being. It's why most endurance athletes have skinny arms and not a lot of muscle mass on them, because they're sacrificing that muscle tissue all the time in order to create this glucose to feed the brain. Now, if you shift over to becoming fat adapted, and you become really good at burning fat, you build the metabolic machinery to burn fat, and you build the metabolic machinery to make ketones at a high rate and to burn those ketones at a high rate, several new kind of concepts enter the picture, one of which is that when you are in ketosis or when you're creating ketones, ketones are an epigenetic signaling device. They actually cause the genes to turn on or off. And so the presence of beta-hydroxybutyrate will, for instance, cause this upregulation of genes that spare protein. So normally when you would have had taken in any amount of protein in excess, the body will find a way to either store it as muscle, to kind of keep the amino acids within a certain, what we call an amino acid sink throughout the body, or deaminate them and you lose them in your urine. When you enter ketosis and you start making these ketones, there's a recognition by the body that we have to be very conservative about how we allocate these amino acids. So let's not deaminate them and pee them out.
Right.
Let's not burn them for fuel. Let's just save them for the building of proteins and perhaps the building of the repair of certain proteins, certain cells, shoring up of the immune system or things like that. It's a very a new sort of concept that's just entered this picture. The idea that by cutting carbs down so low that you can create this epigenetic signaling device that causes the body to spare protein. It's almost counterintuitive, because you think if you're a bodybuilder, can I build or maintain muscle mass on a very low carb diet, on a keto diet?
Right.
And the answer is yes, you can, partly because of this protein sparing effect.
So with this muscle sparing activity that goes on, how does that relate to the amount of protein we need to be taking in, and also what's really going on with our muscles?
Great question. So this notion that we need a lot of protein to maintain muscle has been tossed out the window recently. So we don't really need that much protein. The fact that we can take in excessive amounts of protein has kind of been a nice side effect of a bodybuilder's diet who wants to consume, they want to consume 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories a day, and you sort of have to consume a lot of protein to get that. There's also that assumption that the more protein that I consume, the more muscle I can build. The reality is, first of all, that you don't need that much protein to build muscle. Most of muscle building occurs as a result of the work that you do, the challenge that you give your muscles in the gym, and then the amount of rest that you give them, and then ultimately it's how much testosterone you produced as a result of that workout, growth hormone, things like that. In that large complex equation, the amount of protein isn't that significant. Ultimately, if we look back at how we're designed from an evolutionary standpoint, we're designed to eat a lot of food. Our brains are wired to eat a lot of food. Now, luckily for us, when we eat a lot of food, we gain fat. We gain that, we store that excess energy as fat. I say luckily for us from an evolutionary concept, because today most people are still really good at storing fat. But if you go back thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, food wasn't available 3 times a day. Food was available once in a while, sometimes once and then not for 2 or 3 days. So this wiring that we have in our brains today that wants us to overeat because there may not be another meal for a while, we still have that wiring. we've become so adept at storing fat. Well, our ancestors were also adept at just taking that fat out of storage and using it for fuel the next day and the next day until the next source of food came along. So we have this factory setting at birth that allows us to be great at storing fat and to be great at burning fat. The problem is, shortly after birth, and based on access to foods that we have throughout our lives, we lose this ability to take fat out of storage and to burn it so easily. We become really dependent on regular feedings of carbohydrate every couple of hours.
So if we go back to our ancestors and you take into this consideration the metabolic flexibility that you're talking about, our ancestors, were they in a state of ketosis for long periods of time? I'm really curious about how the two play together.
Well, now we get into an entirely nuanced tangent about ketosis. Because ketosis, by definition, is the excess of ketones in the bloodstream. A lot of people today would look at ketosis as the end goal. I want to be in ketosis. I want to have a lot of ketones in my bloodstream. But the goal really is metabolic flexibility. The goal is to become really good at burning fat and to become so efficient that you don't need to eat a lot of food. So the idea that our ancestors might have been in ketosis is a little bit of a misnomer. They would have been making ketones, but they would have been so metabolically flexible that they would have only been making enough ketones to supply the brain with the fuel it needed to stay cognitive and aware and happy and upbeat and on focus for finding the next amount of fuel. A fat-adapted and keto-adapted individual today or 1 million years ago is an individual whose muscles derive most of their energy from fat, who don't require a lot of glucose for those muscles until the energy expenditure requirements get way, way up there, like 90, 95, 97% of max capacity. Up until that point, most of the energy comes from stored fat. A fat-adapted and keto-adapted individual today, the muscles don't even use that much in the way of ketones because the body has, by that point, if they've spent 6 weeks doing a keto reset, for instance, the body has become adapted, saying, muscles, we don't need ketones. We're so good at burning fat, we don't even need ketones. Save the ketones for the brain. Now, here's the interesting thing about the brain. The brain doesn't have this wild swing in energy demands throughout the day. Your muscles do. You know, if you say, well, I'm going to go run a 5K, you know, your muscles go from using, a couple of calories per hour to using 1,000 calories per hour. So it's a huge increase in the requirements. The brain doesn't have those wild swings. So the brain's energy requirements throughout the day are pretty steady. And with that in mind, and knowing that you've built the metabolic machinery within the brain to use ketones, and knowing that the liver can make up to 150 grams of ketones a day if called upon to do that, that's about 700 calories worth of energy. But then the liver goes, if the muscles aren't using the ketones because they're so good at burning fat, if the brain doesn't need big wild swings of energy, then I can make ketones just slowly and steadily throughout the day and not have this huge excess of ketones in my bloodstream or in my urine. And so people who are truly keto adapted, sometimes they're not even in what we would call ketosis because they're so metabolically efficient. They're so good at extracting energy from their stored body fat. They're so good at producing just the right amount of ketones that the brain needs, knowing that the brain doesn't have these wild swings in energy demands, that you've created this tremendously flexible and efficient organism that is you.
That's such an exciting thought for so many of us that get nervous about, well, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? You talk about this 6-week period, and that is the period of time really to gain that metabolic flexibility. Can you share a little bit more?
The reason I chose 6 weeks is because that's the point at which you're going to probably get 90% of the ultimate potential benefits.
Got it.
And for most people, 6 weeks is a very achievable goal. And so much can happen in that 6 weeks. You can upregulate the number of mitochondria. We call it mitochondrial biogenesis. You can increase the number of these power plants within the cells that actually burn the fat. You can start to derive some of the anti-inflammatory benefits, which come with the epigenetic upregulating and signaling that is available through this ketogenic way of eating. You can start to derive more energy for your brain from ketones. So the brain starts to understand that there doesn't have to be a lot of glucose in order for me, the brain, to have great cognition, to have access to the memories, and to have the production and capacity that I anticipate. One of the things I noticed from my 6 weeks of keto reset that I do once a year now is that I sleep better. And I suspect that one of the reasons for that is that the brain does a lot more work in less time using ketones instead of requiring glucose when I sleep.
It's remarkable. So you're feeling that level of focus, clarity, needing less sleep. You're burning fat for fuel, and you've got this flexibility. And if you look back at the mark of 12 years old and you were looking for longevity, and you were looking for not probably just a lifespan that would be longer, but truly this health span that can be longer, this is how you're getting there.
Absolutely. Now, we can always look back and say, well, if I'd known then what I know now.
Sure.
And in my case, a lot of what I know now, because I learned it the hard way, is more valuable to me.
Right, and to the rest of us,
Yeah.
right? Like what you've been through,
Yeah.
that experience as an endurance athlete, all of those experiences, those nuances, is what enables us to learn, okay, it's about the metabolic flexibility.
Yeah, and like going back to the caveman question about how does that metabolic flexibility manifest itself, you have a day where there's food and you tend to overeat, and then you have a day or two or three where you don't eat, but then you come across, say, a supply of berries or a supply of fruit.
Right.
Now, fruit is probably one of the quickest ways to not only restore glycogen in the body, but also the fructose, which is the sugar part of the fruit, becomes triglycerides, which is stored as fat. So fruit gets stored as fat. Now, from an evolutionary context, this is like, wow, this is so cool, because I'm eating this sweet food. My brain is telling me to overeat it. I know that my body is storing the excess calories as fat. I know that I'll be able to use those excess calories. I'm basically carrying a fuel tank around with me. And by the way, I'm a million years ago, so I'm not thinking about the cover of Shape magazine or anything else. I'm just thinking about survival. So this metabolic flexibility says, when there's food available, I can extract energy from the food. I can store some of the excess calories as food. When there's food not available, I can take some of that stored energy that I put on my body in the form of body fat. I can use it as energy, as an energy source. And I can go about my life as if nothing were bad or nothing were out of whack. It's just part of a normal lifestyle to not eat for long periods of time, but to have access to all this energy that's been stored in glycogen, in the muscles, or in fat on my body, and not worry about losing muscle mass, because one of the effects of being this metabolically flexible beast is that I'm so good now at sparing protein. I'm not wasting protein, so it doesn't take that much protein. I can go long periods of time without eating and not lose much, if anything, in the way of muscle mass. Now, this translates to today when we talk about long periods of fasting.
Right.
Historically, at least in the United States, fasting has kind of been looked on as inadvisable for people because you lose so much muscle mass when you don't eat for 4 days, and it takes you a long time to get that muscle back. And we're also sort of faced with things like The Biggest Loser, where we see people who lose 100 pounds in some short period of time, largely because they've cut their calories way, way back, and then they've increased their amount of exercise that they expend to try and burn off more calories. And yes, they lose 100 pounds, but then they gain it back over time because they've kind of sabotaged the whole process. They've actually burned their muscle away. So there's this assumption that if you fast for long periods of time, you'll lose muscle, and that's a bad thing. And it is a bad thing to lose muscle. But if you're a sugar burner and you fast, that is what happens. But if you become fat and keto adapted, again, you enter this new space of now, when I choose not to eat for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, I have all the energy I need, because everybody's got a certain amount of stored energy in the form of body fat. I don't lose muscle mass because I've got that epigenetic signaling effect of the ketones that's going to spare the protein and not cut into my protein stores. Probably one of the greatest effects of this longer-term fast is autophagy. It's the body's direction to now start to fix damaged proteins, to consume damaged proteins and fats, to actually start consuming old senescent cells for energy and get rid of those damaged cells that would have been causing problems in the long term if they'd hung around too long. So fasting now becomes this amazing new anti-aging experience available to people who have become fat and keto adapted, not just once in a while, but on a semi-regular basis.
So when you're getting into this fat adapted, metabolic, flexible space, what are the things you make sure you don't do? I've got an idea of some of the things you do, so I'd love to just hear, okay, these are the things I make sure I don't do, and these are the things that really help.
Well, so I'm in a metabolically flexible space right now, and I call it the keto zone. So having done the work, having spent time deep in ketosis, and having built the metabolic machinery, having created the number of mitochondria that I have now, I can exist in a space where some days I have 40 grams of carbs, which is clearly a keto strategy, and some days I have 130 grams of carbs, and I can't tell the difference energy-wise or mood-wise between the two. That's almost the definition of metabolic flexibility. I'm at that point of the ancestral being who's like, some days I eat, some days I don't care, it doesn't make a difference, as long as I don't feel different.
Right.
And really, this is about how you feel, right? This isn't about measuring numbers on keto sticks or glucose monitors or things like that. This is really about how do you feel. And if you can get to that point of metabolic flexibility where you feel great on any given day, despite the fact that you might have a 50 or 60 gram swing either way in terms of carb intake, then who cares?
Right.
Right? So now what don't I do? I don't eat large hits of sugar. So I don't eat a whole giant piece of triple chocolate cake. I don't eat a whole bowl of ice cream. I know those things are going to put me, whether or not they put me out of ketosis, they're going to make me feel crappy for what's in them. They're going to make me feel crappy because they've got sugar and processed whatever in it. So that's a thing that I just don't ever do. Now, I'll have 3 bites of that cake. I'll have a piece of cheesecake. I have a taste of something here or there, and that's really, again, knowing where the limitations are for me personally. Other than that, as long as I keep my diet to fruits, vegetables, meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, and seeds, all the things that I know my genetic recipe calls for, then I'm going to be fine. And I don't pay attention to caloric intake on a daily basis. I don't count my macros because I become so intuitively tuned in to these choices on a meal-to-meal basis. I just don't have to think about it anymore. And that's kind of what I try to teach the people who read my books and who go to my website, is like, I want you to live your life, to experience it from a point of view of enjoying every possible moment, enjoying every possible bite, and doing so without any guilt or second thoughts or thinking, oh my goodness, what would Mark have said about this? Or what does the book say about that?
How do you look at keto cycling for the individuals that want to do that? Because there are so many different ways to sort of engage this metabolic flexibility that you're speaking about.
I mean, I think that cyclic ketogenesis is a great strategy for people who are, have a particular goal that they want to achieve. A lot of athletes use a cyclic ketogenic training where they're in ketosis or they're deep keto for long periods of time, and then they might, in advance of a day of hard glycolytic work, top off their carbohydrate stores and pay no attention to it. I mean, think about, being 50 or 60 grams of carbs a day for a week or two, deriving most of your energy from your stored body fat, becoming really good at that metabolic efficiency that we talked about, that metabolic flexibility, being able to go at 90, 92% of max capacity, deriving most of your energy from fat. And then one night, the night before an interval day or the night before a race, have 225 grams of carbohydrate in the form of a sweet potato. It's a perfectly legitimate strategy that's taking advantage of the metabolic flexibility. So the next day you enter that race or that workout, you're good at burning fat, you're great at burning fat, and you've topped off your glycogen stores, and you haven't decreased your ability to burn glycogen. It's still there. So now you have access to all these different fuel substrates during a race or during a workout that the carb-dependent athlete doesn't have access to. The carb-dependent athlete is still like, okay, how many grams of carbs an hour can I cram down my gullet at hour 5 or hour 6 of that triathlon, and not have it be regurgitated.
When someone's becoming fat adapted and they're going through a little bit of that fight or flight, can you speak a little bit more about that transition and the cortisol levels?
There are a lot of ways to do keto wrong, in my estimation. Then there are a number of ways to do keto right. And one of the things that happens to people who are maybe not having the best success or luck with it is that they go all in and they decide that, you know what, I read this book on ketosis and the ketogenic diet, and I'm going to switch from 400 grams of carbs a day to 25 grams of carbs a day. Well, that's an insult to the brain. The brain, which has been used to you feeding it glucose every 2.5 hours for the last 25 years, and now you're going to willingly withhold glucose from that brain, the brain is going to fight back. And the brain is going to get moody and hangry and get a headache. And so that's one of the issues that a lot of people who, for instance, did Atkins years ago, would encounter that same sort of thing. We call it the keto flu or the low-carb flu. It just feels terrible. That happens to people who don't stair-step their way into keto. That's one of the reasons I wrote the Keto Reset Diet. It's really a kinder, gentler way to get to this point where you literally earn the right to go keto. So we take a 21-day stair-step approach to eliminating a lot of the offending foods, the sugars, the pies, the cakes, the candies, the desserts, the pastas, the breads, the cereals, and all those things that convert to glucose. We get rid of those. We eliminate the industrial seed oils, which can be highly inflammatory in a lot of cases. And in its place, we eat meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, a little bit of fruit, go figure, all these things that we should be eating. But you have to really work hard to get more than 120 grams of carbs a day if you eat that way. So now you've gone from 400 grams of carbs a day, which was basically orange juice, waffles or pancakes, a mid-morning bagel snack, a sandwich for lunch and maybe some chips, a bowl of pasta in the evening, and maybe a bowl of ice cream, and you're easily at 400 grams of carbs. So you've gone from that paradigm down to 120 grams, where the body goes, this is less than I'm used to, and I'm going to have to start burning more fat, but I can deal with this, and it's not going to wreak havoc in my brain. After you get to that point of 110, 120 grams of carbs a day, then it's easy to find 50 or 60 grams of carbs that you're not going to eat later on when you go full keto. But you have to kind of earn the right. So we have a test in our book and in our programs. The test is, how do you feel after 21 days of eliminating all these high sugar, high carb foods and still never going hungry, because that's really critical. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Can you go any period of time without eating breakfast? If you can, that's an indication that you're getting good at burning fat. Can you do a mid-morning workout and not have a pre-workout meal or a post-workout meal? If you can, then that's an indication that you're burning fat. How's your sleep? Are you sleeping well? Because if you're not sleeping well, you're producing cortisol. Cortisol then sort of derails this whole fat burning paradigm because cortisol tends to want your body to store fat and tear apart muscle, remember, to make glucose. So how are you sleeping? So we have a lot of these different items that we have in this midterm exam, and if you get a 75 on the midterm exam, you earn the right to go keto for 6 weeks.
Mark, thank you so much for providing so many insights into how we can become fat adapted and metabolically flexible. It's a complete and total honor. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
What an incredible athlete. And he did all this on this, what did you call it, this
metabolic flexibility.
Metabolic flexibility, wow. Look, This is an amazing episode. The fact that you were able to bring together all these experts this way, and literally guys who are sharing information, it just makes it so easy to digest. Thank you so much.
Oh, Montel, I was so amazed by all of the misinformation that I've grown up with, that I've heard, and that so many Americans have. And when these experts started to talk to us about fat doesn't make us fat,
Wow, yeah.
it was really interesting. They are at the forefront of this kind of research, and it's fascinating to see the journey that they're on as they lead all of us as Americans into a new way of thinking about our health and well-being.
And it's so contrary to what we've been told or fed or thought because,
Right.
again, we eat a diet, and I'm gonna say it again, that's based on economics. You know, we're making a lot of people a lot of money, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're making ourselves any better. Look, this is information that you probably enjoyed today. I know you did. And if you enjoyed it as much as we think you did, then you should make sure you share it with a friend. Remember, it's not worth anything if you can't give to others, so make sure. Click that little button that's on the screen right below us. Click on it. It'll immediately share, and you'll guarantee that you're helping someone else start a journey to a better life. Right? Don't you think?
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Well, we're out of time, so we have another episode coming out tomorrow. You've seen episode 1 and episode 2. You're going to share it with your friends. Tomorrow, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'll tell you today. When this is all over, all 9 episodes, you'll be able to get them by themselves and put them in your library at home. So make sure you tune in tomorrow to get more information. Thank you so much for joining us. See you tomorrow.
My parents actually sent me to fat camp when I was 11 or 12 years old, and I went for the summer and I lost weight and I came home and I ate it all back on. I woke up and I just thought, if I don't do this now, I'm gonna be fat every minute for the rest of my life.
These are commodities that are corn and soy. Canola is traded on Wall Street. They have to maintain the value or the economy will collapse. There's this wall around these oils as if that, you just cannot declare them bad. Not just obesity, not just diabetes, Alzheimer's, autoimmune disorders, cancers, every disease you can name. Once you start looking for ways that you can do something, you become unstoppable.
So you're very rarely going to find people in ketosis today. And the consequences of that is a whole range of chronic diseases. When you use metabolic therapies on people with advanced cancers and you watch the tumors melt away and the patients get healthier and go on with their lives with a high quality of life, that's pretty much the bottom line.
So there's a fundamental difference in the metabolism between somebody who is prone to being overweight and somebody who is not. Just knowing that you can manipulate your hormones in the way that you respond to food and that you can do it without depriving yourself is a really important thing to know.
I have been attacked on social media by mainstream physicians and who I believe are probably have an agenda. They try to scare people out of keto. Like, it's you wear the fat you eat, and it's kidney damage, and you get a fatty liver. All those are wrong, because this healthcare system relies on people getting sicker and sicker, and it is the fastest growing industry in the world.